Hello and welcome to ReTech Insights. Today's topic is understanding the components of unique device identification. We'll discuss how UDI is used and the FDA UDI requirements.
So to start off, let's get the introduction and some of the definitions out of the way. UDI is comprised of two components, a device identifier and a production identifier. And that particular identification identifies a product throughout its whole life, anywhere in the world. So it does have some criteria to be very unique and not to be reused for any other device in the future. UDI is an initiative that is being promoted by various regulatory bodies. They obviously want to improve safety, improve the accuracy of event reporting, and so on, and ultimately improve the customer experience by being able to identify products throughout the life cycle. So if we take a little bit more detailed look at that numeric or alphanumeric code of the UDI, we find the device identifier, which is mandatory. It's always going to be part of the UDI. It does identify the labeler and a specific version or model of a device. Now I'm using an example of GS1, and there's 14 digits here that identify our company, actually ReTech, and a particular model. Even though we don't make any medical devices, we do have this assignment. The second portion is that production identifier, and that is conditional on whether or not those particular items are on the label. So a manufacture date, expiration date, lot or batch number, serial number, or distinct ID code, infrequently used, by the way, primarily for devices that have health, human cell and tissue products. If any of those particular identifiers are on the label, then the condition is such that it needs to be included in the UDI. The European Union is slightly different. They have some conditional rules on the manufacturing date. They have a serial or a software version identifier, and they don't make use of the DIN number. But in general, these two components, the device identifier and the production identifier, when placed together, it creates a full UDI. And again, the production identifier may not be there at all, or it might have one or any combination of those particular features. If we were to construct a full UDI with the sample data in front of us, the parentheses 01 close parenthesis prefix is included in front of the device identifier, and that helps the various automated reading computers and other type of barcode readers identify the value that follows. So the 01 identifies those particular digits as a device identifier. And in the same fashion, the 11, 17, 10, and 21, all in parentheses, identify various values in the production identifier. So the full UDI would be all those digits that we see in front of us. We also get a number of questions about how this is coded and placed on the label. So first of all, the coding can be either in a linear, like a single dimension barcode, or it can be in a two-dimensional barcode, sometimes referred to as a data matrix. The actual text that is associated with that barcode can be presented in a single line, or it can be split apart, the device identifier and then followed by the production identifier. The other option in coding UDI is to make sure that you follow one of the approved standards. So FDA and EU have both approved GS1, HIBIC, and ICC BBA as approved issuing standards. In addition to that, European Union has also approved a fourth standard, IFA, primarily for German pharmaceutical activities and also additional products used in German pharmacy. So make sure you connect up with one of those, subscribe to a particular one, and follow their standards in creating your UDI. When you place that UDI on the label, you'll find that in some cases it takes a lot of real estate. Now this is exaggerated a little bit for the particular sample that we have here, but the device identifier, and in this particular example, we do have 4 of those production identifiers on the label. So the manufacturing date, expiration date, lot, and serial number are all on the label itself. So because of their presence, they need to be included with the UDI. Another question that we get is, where is UDI in the medical device life cycle? So I'm using the FDA's as an example here, but very early on, when the layout of a medical device label is put together, you want to make sure that you have room and real estate reserved for that. Make sure there's a placeholder for the UDI in the label. As you design backup systems and data systems, you obviously want to very early on have inclusion of the UDI and many of the attributes that are associated with UDI. When it comes time for commercial distribution, there are regulatory requirements that you report the UDI information and also provide the UDI values on the label itself. So typically the device identifier and number of attributes are reported, and the full UDI is placed on the label. And then if there's any serious adverse events or other types of surveillance that needs to go on throughout the life of the product and UDI is available, that needs to be included in those reporting. As to the use of UDI, you may only be exposed to, as a manufacturer, the regulatory body and maybe a customer that, and these are single handoffs of information about a product. There might be product information that includes UDI and some attributes, but you realize that there are many bands of downstream users of that information. So this information becomes available in the public space, and data processors putting together various support system and electronic health record systems and so on, healthcare providers, patient and other public users are all interested in this information and making sure that it's correct. So there is some responsibility and intent here to make sure that the quality is good and the values that are associated with your medical device are of high quality, and therefore all those downstream users would be able to correctly identify your particular product. The FDA UDI requirements have a number of tenets, 4 basic areas. Basically, the information of that needs to be included on the label has to be expressed, the UDI information has to be expressed in human readable plain text and also in something called automatic ID data capture, AIDC. So that is usually implemented as a 1-dimensional or 2-dimensional barcode. There is a requirement there for the date format as well. A subset of medical devices in the U.S. that qualify need to have the UDI permanently marked on the actual product itself. There is requirements to report device identifier. This is not the production identifier, by the way. This is just the first portion, the device identifier, and a number of attributes. So totaling 57 attributes are reported to the FDA's global UDI database, GoodID. That information is flowed over to a public database hosted by the National Library of Medicine, referred to as Access GoodID. And the 4th major area is making sure UDI is included in your SOPs, all the documentation, recalls, tracking, all other types of support documents that you have for your medical device. As to the timing, the FDA started off with the high-risk devices first, requiring implementation on both the label and on for the reporting of the good data to the GoodID. So class 3s, implantables and life supporting and life sustaining are and Class 2s are all passed.
We are now looking at September of 2022 for the Class 1 compliance date.
And I do want to make a point, and this is universal in our discussion. There is a data flow that supports the label information, and that's well established, in place, so you're already labeling medical devices. UDI does need to be added to that particular label, and it does need to be somehow shoehorned into that particular label, and that is a problem at some point in time. The other data flow, which is on the lower row, is brand new, and this is something that has not been implemented in the past. So when UDI requires it, you'll need to create a procedure, pathway, means to collect UDI information, build the particular messaging, send it to the regulatory bodies, in this particular example, the FDA, so that you do meet the regulatory requirements. Here's another example of UDI being placed on a medical device label. It happens to be the one-dimensional, showing the difference of the presentation of that data and the content when you compare that to the data attributes that need to be reported. So there's a number of attributes categorized here by the identification of the product, the labeler, regulatory information, safety information, packaging, various characteristics of the medical device, and production control attributes. All of these particular attributes need to be submitted to the FDA. And this does present somewhat of a challenge in collecting that information, make sure it's nice and clean and ready for submission. Since the Class 1 compliance date has not occurred yet, looking next year, I thought I'd include a couple very specific notes on Class 1 products. Those manufacturers of Class 1 medical devices, if you find that your Class 1 product has a good manufacturing exemption, so a GMP, I'm not referring to a 510K exception. Almost all Class 1s have the 510K exception, but a few, roughly 15–20% sort of thing, have a good manufacturing exemption. If you find that is true, you have no UDI requirements. The other very broad exception is that all Class 1 devices only need to have the device identifier portion. So the production identifier is not required to be in the UDI. And the third major note here is that in the event you distribute your product in a retail environment and make use of a UPC on your particular label, then that particular UPC identifier can be used as a device identifier and serve as the UDI. No direct marking is required for those particular devices in retail, but you still do need to make a report to the FDA's Good ID database. Those manufacturers that have already submitted their portfolio and have a lot of records in the FDA, a couple words about maintenance. In the event that you have a new version or model of that particular product, you do need to publish a new record to the Good ID prior to distribution. If there's a change to the label values, then you need to, again, submit those updates to the FDA Good ID prior to distribution. If there's an attribute that is not on the label, then you have a grace period of 10 days after your distribution to make sure that the Good ID database is updated.